Country review. Picture this. It's the 10th of March. It's 1985. It's snowing. You're in Moscow. And you've just found out that Chernenko died. Who's Chernenko? Chernenko was the 6th leader of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had been on the rocks for a while, but most people would have predicted that the Soviet Union would have kept on declining. Stonks! Oh, I predict the future. Soviet Union would collapse. Enter stage left. Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev was and still is a prominent Russian politician, and when he assumed control of the Soviet Union in 1985, he was a bit of a young stud. He promised reform, both politically and economically. He seemed to be one of the few people in the government that recognized that the Soviet Union was on a downhill path, and he wanted to do a lot to fix it. Did it work? Fuck no! The whole country collapsed. Was it his fault? It's debatable. The fall of the Soviet Union is something that has puzzled historians ever since it happened. Typically, there are 4 main factors that people attribute to the fall of the Soviet Union. 1. Economics shit. 2. Political shit. 3. Nationalism. And 4. The big boys. That's Gorbachev and Yeltsin, if you didn't know. So Boris Johnson. He's my favorite Soviet leader. I think this is gonna go smoothly with more alcohol.
Yeah, I'm sure that will help.
I opened the door with my mouth. Why don't I have 1 million subs yet? This balloon, Soviet Union. This, Soviet Union in 1917. This is the good bit. You see this? This inflating the economy? This is the Soviet Union in 1920s. Oh, fuck. That was the famine. This is the Soviet Union in the 1930s and 40s. Look at that growth, though, dude. You ready for the growth in the 60s and 70s and 80s? That was it. That was all. Didn't grow much. That's the point we're trying to make here. This pin is 1991. It comes for us all. By the time Gorbachev got to power, the Soviet Union was known for its rapid economic growth. But by 1985, it was in danger of flatlining. During the last few years, it had only grown by 3%. You know, growth is growth, but it's not that good, is it? Especially considering the Cold War. You can't afford to be lacking. So Gorbachev introduced a series of reforms, and his 2-step program was a 5-step program to tackle alcohol. Because alcohol is never good for productivity. The average Soviet household spent 15% of all of their money on alcohol in the 1980s, which is crazy. I mean, it's kind of a misleading fact because the shops didn't really have anything else to spend your money on, but even so, that was seriously impacting the economy, and not in a good way. So Gorbachev introduced a bunch of laws to try and curb alcoholism, including raising the drinking age to 21, shutting down breweries and vineyards. What was the other one? And something else. Did these work? No, not really. People still drank, but they just drank illegally. mobs started brewing bootleg moonshine, which was even worse than the regular alcohol because that shit wasn't safe. It was made in bathtubs where Bell's Delphine was. Kind of the whole problem with the communist system was that if the government guaranteed you employment, if you got fired from your job, it basically meant you could just get another one. So people routinely showed up to work drunk just because it didn't really matter if you got fired. So alcoholism was really getting out of hand. So these gangs that were brewing bootleg beer, they got really powerful. Remember that for later. This video is going to be so fucking long, dude. By this stage, Gorbachev recognized that the Soviet Union needed full-scale economic reform. Enter stage left. Perestroika. Perestroika was meant to fix everything and make the economy really, really good, but it really did not work. He introduced market elements. Oh, that was what he did. Legalization of cooperatives. Basically, for the first time since like the 1920s, you could have your own private business in the Soviet Union. You could have like a cafe.
Not great, not terrible.
Or a flower shop. Nothing bigger than that, though. They're not going to let you touch the steel industry until like 1995, probably. I don't know. Also, joint ventures, baby! For the first time in like nearly a century, if you were a foreign company, you could set up in the fucking Soviet Union, dude. McDonald's opened its first Moscow branch in 1990, and that day it sold more Big Macs than any other McDonald's has in history. And although that is a really significant moment for international relations, actually these things didn't really help the economy that much because there was so much bureaucratic red tape. It was really hard to get your business set up in the Soviet Union. So, what did we learn from the economy? Gorbachev tried to fix it. It didn't work. And all of a sudden the economy was really unstable for more complicated reasons than I have mentioned. But we're going to move on because this is getting way too long. Oh! I didn't even talk about the fucking oil prices in the economic bit. In the 1970s, the price of oil had dropped dramatically on the world market, which was really bad for the Soviet Union because they like exported only oil. And they did some other things, I think. Oh, also they were fighting a war with Afghanistan. No, not with Afghanistan. They were funding a civil war in Afghanistan. And oh boy, they were spending a lot of money on it. Oh, it was so much money. I didn't even talk about the gangs. Okay, remember how I said don't forget about the gangs that were brewing the illegal moonshine? They got more important later, because when Gorbachev introduced all of these economic reforms to allow market mechanisms, they were really powerful, these gangs, from brewing bootleg moonshine. And so they did this fun thing where they said to all of these new cooperative businesses, all of these flower shops and bakeries and cafes, they were like, hey, if you want to continue operation, you're going to pay us some money. Or we're going to break your fucking knees. That really added to the unpopularity of the Soviet government because people widely blamed the Soviet government for the rise in these gangs and not dealing with them. Also, it didn't help that the literal leaders of the local government did basically the same thing, where they demanded money because they were all really corrupt. Oh, probably not all of them. I'm sure there's some really nice guy called Vlad, who was like a purebred Bolshevik. They all demanded money. The Soviet Union, as you might know, was not very free politically. There were elections. You could
American imperialist lies.
you could just only stand if you were part of the Communist Party, and that's fine. Gorbachev thought that the fact that people weren't very free in Russia to say and vote and do how they think it be, he thought that wasn't too good. Enter stage right. Glasnost. Glasnost was Gorbachev's radical new... Shit, fuck. Glasnost was Gorbachev's radical new policy, which allowed more free speech, the opening of the Soviet archives, and probably some other things. He wanted discussion. He wanted to hear the people say what they think. And what did the people say? Boo! Boo! We don't like this fucking totalitarian country that doesn't provide for our needs, and we have chronic food shortages and famines. Glasnost, which was meant to revive interest and passion for communism, really fucking didn't work either, because people did not like communism. After about 30 years of stagnation, people were really fucking tired of the system, and most of them wanted change, so Glasnost gave them the opportunity to voice their opinion for change. There's a lot here that I'm skipping over. Gorbachev also allowed more freedom in the top level of government. There are elections, right? Oh, yeah! Okay, so Gorbachev basically had a bunch of elections in, like, 1 year, and he lost a lot of them. But then he just created the new position of President of the USSR, and he put himself there. Because at that point, everything was fucking... It was all not going well. He wanted to press the fuck fix-it button. But that didn't work. So it gave him, in reality, very little real power. And that's the Do you guys want to hear a very funny Soviet joke? The train of communism is traveling along one day when the engine splutters and dies. Comrade Stalin says, shoot the driver. Comrade Khrushchev says, rehabilitate the driver. Comrade Brezhnev says, let's just shut the blinds and pretend like the train is moving. And Comrade Gorbachev says, we need to get out of the train and jump about and say, the train's not working! 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 If that joke doesn't tell you everything you need to know about the politics of Gorbachev, then I don't know what will. This is important! I know we're talking about Gorbachev in the period of 85 to 91, but let's take a quick break and talk about Gorbachev in 2008, when he recorded a folk album. It's like an album of romantic Russian folk songs, and he's singing. It's got like this isn't even like a joke. If anyone knows where I can find the full record, because there's only like 2 songs on YouTube, I'll pay 4 rubles for that. I don't know what that is in real money. Nationalism. This one's a bit sticky because a lot of people have a lot of very strong feelings about it. So I just want to preface this by saying I've no idea what the fuck I'm talking about, and you shouldn't listen to me. The Soviet Union is not a whole country in the sense that it's made up of lots of different republics and lots of different ethnic groups, all of which have their own distinct personalities and cultures, and that's beautiful. As you may know, or may not know, that's fine, we can all be ignorant. I don't know the lyrics of any Pitbull song. So as we all know, the Soviet Union has significant influence over Eastern Europe in the 20th century. It's not a coincidence that a lot of these states had totalitarian communist governments, let's just say. I'm being really, like, what's the opposite of sensitive?
Insensitive.
Being really insensitive. Oh, so the Soviet Union, since World War II, had spent an extreme amount of money and time and effort propping up communist states in Eastern Europe and elsewhere. It was the communist power in the world, and as a result, you know, they kind of had to keep face and prop up other communist states because of the Cold War. It's no biggie. But by the time Gorbachev rolled around, he thought, hey, I don't think we need to do this. I think I'm going to renounce the Brezhnev Doctrine. That was a pretty big deal, because the Brezhnev Doctrine basically said, if you are a communist government in Eastern Europe and are part of the Warsaw Pact, and you don't want to be part of it, Gorbachev said, if you want if you want to break away from communism, we and the Soviet Union, bro, we ain't gonna really stop you. This was all part of like Gorbachev's big plan. He was like, guys, I'm gonna make people are gonna choose communism, dude. They're not gonna like be forced into it. They're just gonna choose it of their own free will. Oh, no. People did not want to choose communism. That was evidenced by the fact that really rapidly after Gorbachev took power and renounced the Brezhnev Doctrine, they started to break away. Might have heard of a little incident called the breaking of the Berlin Wall. Oh, dude, remember the Berlin airlift? That was fun. Was a pilot. I'm gonna pee. I'm gonna come back with some killer information, jokes, and script. I lied, I didn't come up with anything interesting to say. So the Baltic States, also known as Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in today, were 3 regions of the USSR which really did not want to be part of the USSR. They had their own very strong national identities. They only joined the USSR due to usurpation in World War II. Generally speaking, they were the bad boys of the Soviet republics, in that sense that they were very badly oppressed and had their culture kind of shat all over, and they wanted out. So you'd think Gorby, this man of words and ideals, would say, oh, well, these guys can choose communism, and if they're not going to choose communism, like everyone else in Eastern Europe, they can leave. You're wrong. You lose! Because it's one thing to leave the Warsaw Pact. It's a whole nother thing to leave the Soviet Union. And Gorbachev was like, You
didn't say the magic word.
We're going to send in the tanks, boys. I don't really remember what happened next. I wasn't born yet. So, Gorbachev's attempts proved fruitless because the Baltic states did cede, as in S-E-E-T, no, C-E-E-T?
C-E-D?
Yes, C-E-D-E.
Yeah.
They did that, not like birdseed. Oh god, this is such a sensitive topic, dude. Why did we do this? Czechoslovakia, there's so many. I'm like not even touching so much. Not out of respect, but out of like just idiocy. Well, clearly the Baltic republics weren't the only republics to have strong nationalist sentiments and cede from the Soviet Union in the fucked years. They certainly were the most prominent and the ones that are most illustrative of the impact of nationalism. Again, it's important to know that all of these factors, no one factor sort of caused the Soviet Union's fall. It was a delicate combination of all of them. Again, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. There are like actual genuine historians who spend their whole life trying to work out why the Soviet Union fell when it did and which factor was the most important. I'm just a dude with a microphone and some beers, and clearly I think I'm better than Orlando Feiges, so need some more beers. Ugh, nationalism. Am I done with nationalism? God, I hope so. Said everyone, every leader of every country ever.
Except all the nationalist ones.
Oh yeah, you're right.
They're on the rise.
Oh, fuck, dude. Oh, shit. Fuck a Donald Trump. Get me Donald Tusk, yeah. Tusk. Yeah, I think I said, when I said illustrative, I think that was a good point. Nationalism did play an important role. Fucking cut it there, dude. So, we've been talking a lot about what Gorbachev did. But what about the man himself? He was very young. He was this tall. He had a birthmark on his head. When I say the big boys, I'm talking about Gorbachev and his pretty boyfriend, Boris Yeltsin. They weren't actually dating, but they were like frenemies. Frenemies in the sort of way that brings down a country. So, Boris Yeltsin was initially one of Gorbachev's strong supporters, I think. Yeltsin was a like-minded man to Gorbachev. He was young. He recognized that the country needed reform. However, he was upset with the way Gorbachev was going about it. In September 1987, Yeltsin voluntarily resigned from the Politburo in protest to Gorbachev's ineffective policies. This shit was unprecedented. Nobody in Soviet history had ever resigned from the Politburo. I mean, no, Politburo is like the tippy top of the Soviet system. If you were in the Politburo, bro, you were doing good. You got like Rolls Royces and shit. Whee! Everyone is equal, but some animals more equal than others. Yeltsin quickly became an outspoken critic of Gorbachev, and one of the things he was very instrumental in was propelling nationalism. He was famous for saying, Soviet republics take as much nationalism as you can swallow. Maybe sounds dirty. Something like that. He was supportive of nationalism and independence from the Soviet Union. In 1989, he went to America and he visited a medium-sized supermarket in Houston. And he was so moved by the standard of living that the Americans had compared to the Soviet people. He, in the words of one of his entourage, the last vestige of Bolshevism died in that man that day. He felt as though his country had done a great sin by denying their people the same standard of living that America had done. As a result, Yeltsin became not just an outspoken critic of Gorbachev, but to an extent the Soviet system as a whole. Yeltsin became the figurehead of the Not Gorbachev group. During a little event, it's not that significant, but Gorbachev was almost removed forcibly from power in 1990, I think. During the August coup of 1990 or 1991, depending on your preferred preference, Yeltsin basically saved Gorbachev. Gorbachev was fucked. He was trapped inside his dacha in sunny somewhere in Russia. Oh no, really? Oh god, I know no fact. Gorbachev was trapped, and Yeltsin basically did all of the work to fix the coup. He went out onto the street. He personally went up to the military tanks and said, "Stop this. Your system is broken." And the military put down their weapons. It was an incredible moment of something. I probably should have mentioned this, that the August coup was led by a bunch of like traditionalist Soviets who wanted to go back to sort of the Brezhnev era of just fucking doing the same shit and letting the Soviet Union slowly die. I'm really drunk.
So why did Yeltsin do the thing?
Because Yeltsin recognized that the Soviet Union needed change, so it was easier to challenge Gorbachev than challenge a bunch of old style Soviets, I think. Yeltsin was, to an extent, a large reason for the unraveling of the Soviet system because he offered a populist leader alternative to Gorbachev. For all of those people who were dissatisfied with Gorbachev's leadership, with his slightly shitty reform and well-meaning but misguided ideologies, Yeltsin was the answer. You know, until he fucking became an alcoholic and nothing worked. But that's past 1991, we don't care. History. One frequent interpretation of the fall of the USSR was that Gorbachev put too much on his plate. He went to the fucking family barbecue. He got the beef. He got the chicken. He got the vegetables. He got the motherfucking couscous. And then when he went to sat down, his plate was too full.
He didn't even get a sausage.
Didn't even get a sausage when his plate was full. People often compare the fall of the Soviet Union to the not fall of China in the 1980s. China introduced economic reforms in the 1980s, but they did not loosen their grip on political power. As a result, they managed to successfully introduce market mechanisms into their economy whilst still maintaining power. Some people think that the Soviet Union failed because Gorbachev tried to change too much too fast, too unprepared. Kind of like me recording this. Do I think that interpretation is valid? No, maybe. I think there's a lot of valid interpretations out there, and I think it will be really hard to come to a full conclusion. That's not the answer you wanted, but it's the answer you're gonna get. Thanks for Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Do individuals make history?
No.
Zach says no. I don't know. Neither does anyone else. Is all the countries determined by their economy? Maybe. Are they determined by the politics?
No.
What about nationalism?
Yes.
No one really knows. There are historians far smarter than me and far soberer than me who have spent their entire lives trying to work out this Soviet question. Why did the Soviet Union fall? No one thought it was going to fall in 1985, but then it did. In the words of Orlando Figes, the streets of Moscow were returning to the revolutionary attitudes of 1917, but this time they did not want communism. The Soviet Union was formally disbanded in December of 1991. The republics became independent. No, I don't know, it doesn't matter. I've skipped over an awful lot here, and what I haven't skipped over has been horrifically simplified, falsified, and overall not correct. But nonetheless, I hope this video has been informative, interesting, entertaining, or perhaps even disgusting. I bid you adieu.